October 9th, 1831, a man walks towards a church in the small Greek town of Nafplio. He is the head of state of a freshly independent nation, a nation that exists in large part because of him. Before he reaches the door, two assassins shoot and stab him to death. He dies on the steps. That man was Ionnis Kapodistrias, former foreign minister of the Russian Empire, architect of Swiss neutrality, founding governor of modern Greece, and, as we will explore today, the world's first practitioner of what we now call people's diplomacy. My guest is Dionysios Drosos, Professor Emeritus of Moral and Political Philosophy at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. Professor Drosos, welcome.
Thank you, dear Reggie. It's always a privilege to speak about this man, who was very important for he changed the rules of international relations in his manner. And he is really very underestimated. Kapodistrias was born in 1776 in Corfu. 1776, the year of American independence and the year of the first publication of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Corfu then was a part of the Venetian world, and later, under the auspice of Russian Empire, they formed the Septisular Republic 1800 to 1808. His family, Kapodistrias' family, was a Corfiot aristocracy. He studied medicine, philosophy, and law, and he developed very much his administrative ability and political moderation during this short period of the Septisular Republic. He was involved in politics during this period, and he was very distinguished by his capacity for compromise, his administrative discipline, his lack of factionism, and his moral integrity. And he was noticed by Ludwig von Stackenfeld, who was a Russian envoy in the region. In the 1807, after the Treaties of Tilsit, for a short time, the Ionian Islands passed under French control. At this year, he left his island, and he chose to move to Russia. He went to St. Petersburg at 1809, and he was aligned politically with Russia against Napoleonic France. He gained the trust of the Tsar Alexander I because of his knowledge of the European political systems, his experience in constitutional administration, his ability to navigate in a multi-ethnic political environment, and his integrity. And he participated at the Congress of Vienna, was the main adversary to Metternich, and on 1816, Kapodistrias became co-foreign minister of Russia alongside with Karl Nesselrode. He was very influential and very prestigious, and he's very important for Greece because he was the first governor of independent Greece and the only, if I may say, governor who fought really for the national independence of Greece. It's the only period that we enjoyed this trial for real independence, and this was one of the causes which led him to this bitter end, because he was assassinated. He is underestimated, and the reasons are multiple. Uh, the governors of Greece after the end of Kapodistrias were the heirs of those who assassinated, if I may say, because they were subaltern and dependent to foreign powers, namely Britain. Worldwide, we can find some information about the importance of Kapodistrias reading the book by Henry Kissinger, A World Restored. This was his PhD, published in 58. Kissinger was an admirer of Metternich, and he took the point of Metternich against Kapodistrias, and he acknowledges that he was very clever, very skillful diplomat, and was an obsession of an obsessive enemy of Metternich. But the view that Kissinger delivered us is that Kapodistrias was romantic with vague revolutionary ideas and a factor of instability rather than someone to be trusted. So his importance was underestimated, with the exception of the state of Russia, of Switzerland, in which he plays a very important role for the unification of the country, and in Greece. But in Greece, although it's very estimated by great part of the people and some part of the intelligentsia, I would say that the admiration for him is rather hypocritical, because the heirs of Kapodistria didn't follow his policies.
What I would like to ask you a couple of follow-up questions. How was it that a man from Greece rose so spectacularly, was so important within the Russian system? How did that happen?
He gained the trust of the Tsar, and he was very distinguished for his abilities, and it was very useful for Alexander I, very often as a counterweight to the conservative court factions. So he was a good ally for a period of time, because after 1818, he lost influence, and he was little by little isolated until eventually in 22 he gave his resignation and left Russia for some years in Switzerland, very fruitful years. And after this, he was appointed the governor of Greece. So it was very skillful, and it was the best diplomat who was in a state to fight against the famous Metternich of Austria. And we can see what is the matter, the cause of this fighting.
What I'd like to know now is to transition to what he really has contributed to what we call today modern day diplomacy. He devised, I don't even want to call it a system. I think it was something inside of him that was innate, that he felt the need to, in his work, to include people at the bottom, people who had not been represented. And people have talked about the 4 pillars of the system, I guess we'll have to call it that now, of his idea about diplomacy. I want you to explain how and why he went to the diaspora, people that were scattered throughout Russia, Austria, Switzerland, and Greece. He really was quite revolutionary because he believed in popular sovereignty. He believed in cultural soft power of influence. And what he did was he combined official and unofficial integration. And can you talk a little bit more, maybe how he arrived at that? I think it was something instinctive that he realized that the system of policymaking and estate building was not successful because it did not serve the needs of the people, and they were not listening to the needs of the people. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I agree with you. It was instinctive, and he spontaneously, a vanilla letter of citizens' diplomacy, he applied some policy that resembles to this system. Kapodistrias could not openly support the Greek Revolution while serving Russia, but he quietly facilitated the spread of pro-Greek sentiment in European society. Greeks were dispersed all over Europe. It was a great diaspora in many cities of Europe, in Vienna, in Geneva, in Odessa, St. Petersburg, and many other places in Russia, but the hub was Odessa. Kapodistrias encouraged intellectual circles, university societies, literary networks, and merchants, diaspora merchants. He dispersed information about the oppression that the Greek people was under the Ottoman Empire, and they gather money, gather sympathy to build schools, to build printing presses and humanitarian relief during the Greek War of Independence. So he encouraged and coordinated Philhellenic committees, churches, charities, private donors across Europe. He organized and raised funds for the refugees, the orphaned children, medical aid, and reconstruction. This was a kind of people-driven diplomacy with civilian networks in the civil society, which resulted in international pressure for the revolution and material support. So we can see his diplomacy to be developed in 3 levels: as state diplomacy, as elite intellectual networks, scholars, writers, political thinkers, and third, civil society and diaspora networks, merchants, committees, and volunteers. So he tried to mobilize non-state actors and public opinion. We have entered the era of opinion, and Metternich was very well aware of it, and he fought for the opinion against the ideas, the reformist ideas of Kapodistrias. So beyond formal state diplomacy, we have this mobilization on the level of civil society.
I want to ask you now another question. He obviously achieved a great deal in a very short period of time, but he obviously made some enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if I'm correct in my opinion that he offended powerful people
Mm-hmm.
in a traditional structure.
Mm-hmm.
And is this what led to his assassination? He was a threat to the establishment. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
When he came to Greece, he was before a disaster, a physical disaster, a depopulation, a poverty, the lack of centralized power. And he fought against regional elites to build a concentrated state because he thought that this is quintessential for the formation of the nation and the independence of the nation, and to represent the nation in the international environment. So, the regional elites were powerful families, military chiefs, and warlords, and wealthy ship owners from some islands like Hydra and Spetses, who participated in the War of Independence, but they have some vested interests in a decentralized power system, if you can call this a system. It's an anarchy. So his reforms included appointing state governors instead of local magnates, reorganizing taxation under central control, creating a national army loyal to the state and not to the warlords, limiting the authority of local political networks. It was very easy to make enemies because they experienced the destruction of their authority. But under the pretext of a struggle for constitutional democracy, because the opposition to Kapodistrias fought under the banner of constitutional democracy without having any experience of democracy or constitution. And we can say that Greece began to have a constitution 10 years after the assassination of, 12 years after the assassination of Kapodistrias. So the monarch ruled without a constitution, but nobody was bothered. So these decentralized elites were encouraged by foreign agents, by the ambassador of Britain, by the government services of Britain, because British were afraid of Kapodistrias very much because of his previous service under the Tsar of Russia, and they were afraid that Greece might become a Russian satellite in the Eastern Mediterranean, which they don't want at all, and they prefer a political weaker and international dependent Greece under a monarch who was under their control, which eventually succeeded to have. So we have a fight against the Kapodistrias from the interior or from the exterior. And this coincidence resulted in his assassination in 31.
As I'm listening to you talk about his life, I see so many parallels to the situation we are in today.
Yes.
The governments that we have in the West, in the United States, and across Europe do not represent the needs of the people. This position is quite popular, not only in alternative media, but even in mass media. And here it was 150, 200 years ago, he was trying to go against the establishment to do what was right, not only for the people, but the state. And I think we find ourselves in that very situation today. The other thing I think that's really important is that what he did was very risky to go against the establishment, and he lost his life. We have seen that Many times throughout history, in the United States of America, we've seen it with people like John Kennedy. We've
Mhm.
seen it with people like Martin Luther King. We've seen it like people with Robert Kennedy, who threatened the established powers and they lost their lives, just as Kapodistrias did. The other thing that I think you pointed out that was so important, and I don't want to call it a system because I don't think he would think of it as a system. It was just something instinctive for him to be able to realize in order to bring about change, you have to reach all different elements of a particular society, including the people at the bottom, including the people of the diaspora.
His integrity, he refused to have even a salary as a governor. And he gave all his money for the country he served. One more difference with this Epstein Club.
It seems to me that three things define his legacy and for how we understand diplomacy today. First, he invented the diaspora as diplomatic instrument. Every modern state that leverages its overseas communities is consciously or not following a template he designed in Vienna 2 centuries ago. Second, he pioneered dual track diplomacy, the integration of official state power with unofficial civil society mobilization, what international relations scholars today call track two diplomacy, back channel negotiations, civil society engagement, people to people connections. Kapodistrias was doing this systematically in 1814. He was a century and a half ahead of his time. Third, and most profoundly from my perspective, he established the principle that small states can punch above their weight through moral authority and network intelligence. Greece in 1820 had no army, no territory, no treasury, but it had a man who had personal relations with every major European decision maker who had shaped public opinion across the continent, who had cultivated a generation of educated Greeks ready to build a state. That is national power, just not of a conventional kind. Kostas, this brings us to where we are today when citizen diplomacy has been defined by delegations of people from one country exchanging visits with people from another country. You are the General Secretary of the international organization Friends of Crimea. Our organization has developed a hybrid model or system of citizen diplomacy that involves much more than delegations of citizen diplomats visiting Russia, for example. Can you explain this system of some 40 national Friends of Crimea clubs, annual conferences, our website, and Telegram channels, as well as how individual clubs not only share what is going on in their countries to promote change, but also offering suggestions for institutional change and policy decisions?
Friends, dear Reggie, very happy to be with you today. It's a great opportunity for us in the International Association Friends of Crimea to explain a little bit about our project, which started and was born in Yalta in 2017 as an initiative not only within Russia and within Crimea, which had been reunited with Russia at the referendum in 2014, a referendum that was recognized by many, many nations and peoples, but not from the West, from the European Union and North America, although it was a majority of people in Crimea, not only the Russian majority, but also the minorities, which were guaranteed complete democratic rights that had to do with their origins, their ethnicity, their religion, and so on. These rights were totally guaranteed by the Russian Constitution of the Russian Federation, but also by the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, which reunited with Russia. Now, our project has 8 main pillars, and I would like just to name them in order for the people to understand who are watching us, that we take into account the geopolitical considerations in our times, in our planet, if I may say, in our home, Earth, which is a very complex situation we're going through in the 21st century, in the beginning of the 21st century. So we have to work on the development of diplomatic relations, the perception of public opinion, which plays an important role in citizens' diplomacy and people's diplomacy today, the legal and regulatory issues, which have to do with the sanctions that are being applied towards the Russian Federation and Crimea, sanctions which are very harsh, not only for the people that are targeted to, but mostly from the people they start with, because they backfire many, many times. Look at the European Union today, their energetic asphyxia, and there are many, many problems they encounter with their economies, and the social injustice which reigns in many, many countries in the European Union and North America also. So sanctions are not always a very good weapon, because it backfires, as we can see today towards the West. The economic cooperation between peoples and nations is something that we work on very thoroughly, and we try to do a lot on that. One of the main things we try to do is to counter propaganda and disinformation campaigns, because the world of lies and the world of perception is a science today, through hybrid wars, media wars, and it's a very fine science, which it's difficult sometimes to understand where lie and truth lies, where it stands. And that is a very difficult job for us. That is why when we citizens around the world in our 49 national clubs in Africa and Latin America and Asia and Europe get together, people from many different colors and religions and languages, we have one common goal: peace, cooperation, social and international justice. And that unites so many people around the world today, although they have this so-called barriers of languages and differentiation of understanding things. We do understand what we're trying to do. We try to work also on our 7th pillar, which is the security of the members of our clubs in some countries that regard the national clubs within the European Union today as members that perhaps belong to somehow a very shadowy situation, where they're sometimes even named as foreign agents of the Russian Federation. We have had this type of situations, very harmful to people and families. I could name some of these people, but it's not important. These are heroes within our societies, within our international association. They have paid heavy prices. They have had to move from their country, some of them. They have lost their jobs. And we regard them as people who stand for their beliefs in peace and international justice. And that has to do also with the 8th and last pillar, which is maintaining international cohesion and focus on what we're trying to do. So the International Association of Friends of Crimea is trying to bring together peoples, organizations, overcome political and government bureaucracies around the world. And also, the most important thing is trying to fill the void of international justice, which does not prevail, unfortunately, today, even if we speak about the Middle East or the peripheral wars, even in Africa and other parts of the world, where tensions are growing incredibly in a stand from the West, trying to go up against the wind and the tides of time, which means that a new multipolar world is beginning. It's not just in its birth, it's growing in a very, very quick way, where people are trying to believe and have to believe that a more just world is possible, a better world is possible for everybody, without wars, without racism, without anger from peoples. And one of the main objects and subjects of our International Association Friends of Crimea is trying to help in that direction. So countering information warfare, strategy, tactics, digital and social media operation against us and against nations, people's diplomacy, the architecture of people's diplomacy, how it works. It's something very beautiful to live and see when we come out in speaking about differences and we join together in our meetings, whether they're meetings through the audio, visual, videos, or meetings with physical appearances, mostly in Russia, because that is a place where we can meet all together. And we have to go against sanctions, even traveling sanctions that exist for many, many of our members and friends. So the geopolitical stakes are very important, and we have to overcome. And we have to overcome and work and multiply our efforts and our national clubs around the world, not just become a majority for more places and more nations, but to become more effective. We're not perfect, we're human, but we will try to work together in order to overcome difficulties which are created by very, very strong enemies, which lack something we have, the belief in peace. Thank you.